I can't hear.
Do you have a pen? So maybe the cushion is not high enough for this height.
We've already checked.
Okay.
Thank you very much. This is not being recorded, I trust. We're not at film yet. Yes, Annie, you can relay anything coming from the back of the room because I'm quite deaf. It is challenging with everybody wearing masks because I read lips. It's funny.
Okay, is this one on too?
Oh, you are going to? Okay.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you can see and hear us okay here at the Garchin Institute. And we're so happy that Lopon Barbara DuBois has come, made the journey here, crossed great rivers, and climbed mountains to get here, honestly. And we're just happy to be able to tune in with all of you. And I want to also just let you know a few things before we start. This unbelievable, incredibly beautiful, profound gift that Lopon Barbara has given to us all is available. The Brave, Generous, and Undefended, the Heart Teachings on the 37 Bodhisattva Practices. So you can purchase this on the web store. Even during the teachings, you can email us whatever inscription you would like for Lopon Barbara to inscribe while she's here, and then we will be sending them out next week. So that is an option for you. And then the other thing I want everyone to know is that Lopon Barbara has graciously agreed to accept questions. However, she would like it if you could email the questions, or you can send it online through the YouTube chat, and we will make sure she gets those on her lunch break, and then she will be able to address the questions this afternoon in the afternoon session. Okay, without any further delay, we are so grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christina. I'm grateful, too, that we are here on the mountaintop, having, as you put it, braved the rivers that are running. We've had a lot of rain and snow. Very good timing for a Dharma event. So, hi, everyone. Some of you I know are watching right now, tuned in with us, and many I don't know probably. There are a few human beings in the temple. I'm happy to have them coming to sit, too. I am thrilled to be here, especially under the circumstances that we all are sharing on this planet at this time, and that's what we'll talk a lot about today in various ways. But for now, let's begin with welcome to everyone. Please know that we're not separated by events or distance or time. We're multidisciplinary in the ways that we work in the world, and we're multidimensional in our being in the world. When we're sitting together physically, we think that that's presence, and it's shared existence in a moment in time. But presence is of the mind, capital M mind, so we can always be present with one another. There is no separation ever. So, on that note, we begin. Let's do our opening prayers together. We'll do pages 1, 2, 3, all the way to, we'll do 1 through 5, okay? All mother sentient beings, limitless as space, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience, may they experience happiness, be free from suffering, and swiftly may they attain precious, unsurpassed enlightenment. All it
sound test?
Mm-hmm, sure. That was it.
Well, we have a very full temple. There's 70 people online right now watching.
Wonderful. Welcome, everybody.
Okay, you can start.
Okay, we're back. Thank you. Now we'll recite the 37 Bodhisattva practices. If you have your book, it's in the book at the front. And if you don't, you probably remember much of it. So, all good. In the copy that I'm reading from this morning, there's an opening greeting from Garkuncha Gyaltsen, which is Garchen Rinpoche's name. And he says to all of us, "As you have been my parents, I love you. To those who love me, I wish to give something that is like my own heart, the twofold bodhicitta, which is also the heart of the Buddhas of the three times. As this book explains the two types of bodhicitta, please read it every day." Namo Lokeshvaraya. While seeing that all phenomena neither come nor go, you strive solely for the sake of all beings. Supreme Guru and Protector Chenrezig, at all times I respectfully pay homage to you with my body, speech, and mind. The perfect Buddhas, source of all benefit and happiness, arise from having accomplished the true Dharma. Since that depends on knowing the practices, I shall explain the way of bodhisattvas. Having now gained this great ship of freedom and fortune so difficult to find, in order to free yourself and others from the ocean of cyclic existence, listen, reflect, and meditate day and night without distraction. This is the way of a bodhisattva. Attachment to loved ones churns like water. Hatred for enemies rages like fire. In the darkness of ignorance, one forgets what to adopt and what to avoid. Abandon your homeland. This is the way of a bodhisattva. When negative places are abandoned, disturbing emotions will gradually decline. Without distractions, attention to virtue naturally grows. When the mind becomes clear, certainty in the Dharma arises. Live alone in seclusion. This is the way of a bodhisattva. Family and longtime companions will part from each other. Possessions gained with effort will be left behind. Consciousness, a guest, will leave the guest house of the body. Let go of all worldly concerns. This is the way of a bodhisattva. In bad company, the three poisons grow stronger, the activities of learning, reflecting, and meditating decline, and love and compassion are lost. Give up such companions. This is the way of a bodhisattva. When one follows a true spiritual friend, faults will dissolve and good qualities will grow like the waxing moon. Consider this friend more dear than your own body. This is the way of a bodhisattva. Who can worldly gods, themselves imprisoned in samsara, protect? Therefore seek refuge in the three jewels, the undeceiving source of refuge. This is the way of a bodhisattva. The Buddha taught that all the unbearable suffering of the lower realms is caused by wrongdoing. Therefore never act wrongfully, even at the cost of your life. This is the way of a bodhisattva. Like a dewdrop on a blade of grass, the happiness of the three worlds vanishes in but an instant. Strive for the supreme state of never-changing liberation. This is the way of a bodhisattva. When mothers who've loved you since beginningless time are suffering, what good is your own happiness? Therefore give rise to bodhicitta in order to liberate infinite sentient beings. This is the way of a bodhisattva. All suffering without exception comes from seeking your own happiness. The perfect Buddhas are born from the altruistic mind. Therefore truly exchange your own happiness for the suffering of others. This is the way of a bodhisattva. Even if someone driven by great desire steals all your wealth or lets others steal it, dedicate to them your body, possessions, and all virtues of the three times. This is the way of a bodhisattva. Even if someone cuts off your head when you haven't done anything wrong, take all their negative deeds upon yourself through the power of compassion. This is the way of a bodhisattva. Even if others slander you throughout a billion worlds, in return speak with a loving mind of their good qualities. This is the way of a bodhisattva. Even if someone exposes your hidden faults and insults you in front of others, view that person as a teacher and bow with respect. This is the way of a bodhisattva. Even if someone you've cared for as dearly as your own child regards you as an enemy, love that person even more as a mother would her ailing child. This is the way of a bodhisattva. Even if someone of equal or lower status, driven by pride, treats you with disdain, respectfully place them on your crown as your teacher. This is the way of a bodhisattva. Though you may be impoverished, always disparaged, gripped by disease and tormented by spirits, never lose courage, but take on the misdeeds and pains of all beings. This is the way of a bodhisattva. Though you may be famous and revered by many and are as rich as the wealth god himself, having seen that worldly fortune is without essence, do not be proud. This is the way of a bodhisattva. If the enemy, your own anger, is not tamed, subduing outer enemies will only make them increase. Therefore, subdue your own mind with the army of love and compassion. This is the way of a bodhisattva. Sensory pleasures are like salt water. The more you drink, the greater your thirst. Abandon at once all things that give rise to clinging attachment. This is the way of a bodhisattva. The way things appear is your own mind. Mind itself primordially transcends fabricated extremes. Knowing just this, do not create concepts of subject and object. This is the way of a bodhisattva. When you come across things that attract you like beautiful rainbows in summertime, do not regard them as real and abandon clinging attachment. This is the way of a bodhisattva. Oh, suffering is like the death of your child in a dream. How exhausting it is to hold illusory appearances as real. Therefore, when you meet with difficult circumstances, see them as illusory. This is the way of a bodhisattva. When even one's body must be given up when aspiring for enlightenment, what need is there to mention material things? Therefore, practice generosity without hope of reward or karmic results. This is the way of a bodhisattva. If you lack moral discipline, you cannot accomplish even your own purpose. So wanting to achieve the purpose of others is truly absurd. Therefore, protect your discipline without concern for worldly existence. This is the way of a bodhisattva. For bodhisattvas who desire a wealth of virtue, all harm is like a precious treasure. Therefore, without hostility, be patient with everyone. This is the way of a bodhisattva. Even hearers or solitary realizers who accomplish only their own purpose strive as if putting out a fire on their head. Seeing this, practice with diligence the source of good qualities for the sake of all beings. This is the way of a bodhisattva. Disturbing emotions are destroyed by insight grounded in calm abiding. Knowing this, cultivate meditative concentration that perfectly transcends the four formless absorptions. This is the way of a bodhisattva. Without wisdom, the other five perfections alone are not enough to reach complete enlightenment. Thus, combined with skillful means, develop the wisdom that does not distinguish among the three spheres. This is the way of a bodhisattva. Unless you examine your own confused ideas, you might look like a practitioner but not be acting like one. Therefore, always examine yourself and abandon confusion. This is the way of a bodhisattva. If you are driven by disturbing emotions and talk about another bodhisattva's faults, it is actually to your own detriment. So don't mention the faults of those who've entered the great vehicle. This is the way of a bodhisattva. Concern for gain and respect causes conflict and a decline in the activities of learning, reflecting, and meditating. So abandon attachment to your circle of friends, relations, and benefactors. This is the way of a bodhisattva. Harsh words disturb others' minds and thus diminish the practice of a bodhisattva. Therefore, abandon harsh speech, which is unpleasant to others. This is the way of a bodhisattva. When disturbing emotions become habitual, it is difficult to reverse them with antidotes. Thus, the soldier of mindfulness wields antidotes as weapons and destroys disturbing emotions such as attachment the moment they start to arise. This is the way of a bodhisattva. In brief, wherever you are and whatever you are doing, always examine the state of your mind. Act to accomplish the purpose of others through constant mindfulness and awareness. This is the way of a bodhisattva. With the wisdom of threefold purity, dedicate all the virtue gained from having made such effort toward enlightenment. Dedicate it to clear away the suffering of infinite beings. This is the way of a bodhisattva. Thank you very much for being here. In these weeks of great challenge and uncertainty and unpredictability, I've received many calls from many people who seem to be wanting to touch in, to be reminded of what we know is true. In this moment when everything that we rely on in the material world has been thrown up in the air to come down in who knows what new patterns, to lean back on habituated reactions of fear and anxiety and sorrow and confusion and blame and shame and all of that we know so well, and sometimes, unfortunately, hold so dear. Instead, to lean back on what we know to be true is the course of the practitioner who is walking through circumstance rather than being mired in circumstance. And what we see around us in what I'm calling epidemia, the new land that we're dwelling in for a while, is that it is a circumstance. Like all phenomenal reality, all events and occurrences, all appearances, all experiences, both inner experiences and outer experiences, arise from causes that have been established in the continuum of mind. Garshan Rinpoche so helpfully explains in teaching about karma that we have individual karma that flowers when the individual karmic seeds that we have laid down come to fruition in a certain circumstance that makes it possible for that karma to come to completion. So all karma naturally exhausts. And we have group and collective karma that's created by all of us inhabiting a certain reality together and seeding it the way one seeds a large field, seeding it with cause. Rinpoche has spoken about this epidemic that we find ourselves in, particularly as being related to the seed causes in our mind streams. Make no mistake, it's in our mind streams, of anger and hatred and jealousy. In other words, those causes that separate, that have us fixate on I and you, or this and that, and that bring us into the ways of thinking that not only arise in, but also then perpetuate thought forms and reaction patterns of this is good, this is bad, blame and shame, attributing cause to circumstance rather than to the mind. It's a hard thing to talk about in this circumstance. Some people don't want to hear this kind of explanation, but we're sitting here in the extraordinarily potent field of peace and love and clarity that is this Dharma center called the Garchen Buddhist Institute. So we must speak what we have been taught and what we have learned through experience is true, rather than rely on conventional explanation for anything that is happening. At the same time, we pay attention to the circumstance and the conditions, and do everything that we can as ordinary human beings and as great bodhisattvas, wherever we are on that continuum between the ordinary and the sublime, We do everything we can for one another. Everything we can. So, as the first lines in the 37 practices point out to us, let me come to this with an exact reading of it, rather than trying to rely on this memory. Tokme Zangpo, the author of the 37 Bodhisattva practices, the essence of all Buddha Dharma, and the highest path to enlightenment is laid out here in this very small and modest text. Greeting the Bodhisattva, the Buddha of compassion, Tokme Zangpo says, while seeing that all phenomena neither come nor go, you strive solely for the sake of all beings. This is the essence of the 37 practices and the essence of the wisdom and the activity of the Bodhisattva in the world, whatever world it is, and whatever wave is sweeping over that world in that moment. We seek to have an understanding and eventually, ultimately, direct experiencing of the true nature of reality as it is, which we call sometimes the absolute or the ultimate, and to establish our mind with steadfast confidence and certainty in that understanding that we call the absolute, and in which nothing ever comes or goes, in which there is no arising or falling. There's not even any word for suffering. While in the phenomenal reality that we create and that we inhabit, both sporting and trapped, we think, everything is coming and going all the time. This we call impermanence. And all that is coming and going all the time is coming and going based on causes and conditions. This we call interdependence. So all of material reality, our bodies, our teeth, our eyes, our embraces, our sorrowful partings, our fears, all of this, all of the physical reality of the planet that we live on, that we are, everything we are comes from the material of this planet. So we can say we are the earth, not just that we are children of the earth or that we live on earth or inhabit earth. We are that physically. Everything that we rely on for stability and certainty in the material world is here for a moment because of causes that allow it to arise based on conditions that allow it to abide for a moment, and when the cause is exhausted, the object, the material reality, the experience, the phenomenon will fall away again. Or when the circumstances no longer support it, it will crumble. These noble truths of impermanence and interdependence are responsible for our clinging to material reality. We think if we like something that we want it to stay. If we don't like something, we want it to go, but it's going to stay and go no matter how we feel about it. I think I'll read you, one of the things I want to do while we're here together today is just occasionally dip into this book that has just appeared in the world as a material phenomenon, having leaped out of my head slowly over a number of years. So I want to read something about impermanence and start there, because what we're confronting here, or what we're living in, this circumstance that I'm calling epidemia, is impermanent. Here it is in force, taking over lives, taking away precious lives, taking away our equanimity, frightening us, making us sorrowful. It's passing through as we are passing through. How we pass through. This is our moment to come really to, let me use this word, this is a moment for us to come to greet the potential of our Bodhisattva aspiration with a certainty that this aspiration, which I will speak much more about in a bit, that this aspiration will flower in the moment that we confront our greatest fear and see that we are bound together with every other human being on this planet in confronting this and coming into relationship with, coming into wise relationship with this epidemic that I'm calling with some softness. I'm using the word epidemia, which is a softer kind of greeting on my part. So verse 4 on impermanence. Family and longtime companions will part from each other. Possessions gained with effort will be left behind. Consciousness, a guest, will leave the guest house of the body. Let go of all worldly concerns. This is the way of a bodhisattva. And let me underline when I read that pithy instruction, this is all about practice. This is not about, oh good, suddenly I now have the instruction and I now will live in an entirely different mode and I won't have my grief or my sorrow or my fear. That's not the way it works for most of us. Most of us receive the teaching and then we come to grips with it, one way or another. Sometimes very easily, saying, yes, this is the information I've been waiting for, now I can go forward. Sometimes with a great deal of difficulty and resistance. So the instruction to let go of all worldly concerns is actually perfect for us in this moment. We're not even supposed to go out of the house. And we need a very high degree of trust and caring for one another to be in this temporary state that we're all in together. Some of us are well at the moment, maybe sick the next. Some are sick now, maybe well the next. Some will die. Some will help to the end of their ability to even breathe. And some will be sitting on a mountaintop in retreat and not even know it's happening. The epidemia. So letting go of all worldly concerns looks different for each one of us at the moment, but there are aspects of it that are common and that are our doorway into greater understanding and fuller presence. Letting go of all worldly concerns. Let's be present with that instruction for a moment. So I want to teach, now I want to just read part of the commentary on impermanence. Impermanence and worldly concerns. Nothing we create, work for, rely upon, care about, detest, suffer from, reject, delight in, or cling to will continue forever. What comes together will come apart. What is gathered will disperse. What we have met with we will part from, and even our precious body will fall away like a patch on an old coat at the time of death. We can't even say that our true nature, the true nature of all phenomena, is permanent, for permanent seems to apply to something that has material existence. What we could say about our true nature: uncreated, it is undying. Uncompounded, it does not disperse. Neither coming nor going, it is unchanging. The Absolute always already is. So we will have to look to phenomenal reality, which is of course what we're living in, to understand the significance of impermanence for us. If you were a non-amphibious fish, you'd be hard put to describe water. Water is simply the nature of reality for that fish. I think that's how challenging it is for us to approach impermanence. It is simply the nature of phenomena, just the way everything is. And yet see how we hang on, how we push away. We push away that which is going to fall away anyway, like a comment that stings, dissolving as the words are being spoken, and we cling to that which we don't have in our hands even at the moment we're clutching to it, like our reputation, which is held by others, never by ourselves. We're flopping around like our fish, now not in water but on sand, trying to escape coming to terms with impermanence, as if it is something terrible and painful and sad and frightening. In our conditioned ways, habituated to attachment and aversion, when we think about impermanence, we think, oh no, my darling is going to die. Yea, my zit is clearing. Ah, the drought is ending, water's coming. Oh, the glacier is melting, water's going. We think of impermanence as an enemy when it's really one of our most precious friends. How wonderful. Listen closely to this. How wonderful. The sufferings of all beings are temporary. Samsara itself is impermanent. This simple, unadorned understanding is one of the most profound methods for approaching emptiness. Impermanence points inescapably to the illusion-like nature of phenomenal appearances, to the open, clear, empty nature of reality. When you experience suffering, or even mild discontent, go to impermanence. When you are squirming with grasping or repulsion, remember impermanence. At the time of death, whether sudden or lingering, consciousness, the guest, is leaving the guest house of this body. How shall I leave then? Clinging to the bag of bones with all its histories and mysteries? Holding tight to all my sorrows and regrets and pleasures and passions already dissolved into the past? Or with a cheerful, open mind, recognizing simply that I have been living and now I am dying, and turning to greet the love light of my true nature, relaxing into the liberating embrace of Mother Emptiness. So I have a practice that I would like to offer you for this moment when impermanence is upon us. A student asked, how do we meditate on impermanence? And the word meditation, as some of you know, I rarely use because I really, as the years have gone by, know less and less what it points to. I'm not sure what meditation means anymore. But meditating in this moment would be, let's think of a way to describe it. Paying attention. How do I pay attention to impermanence? How do I understand impermanence? So here's the meditation, and because it will be on the live stream tape, you can, if you think it's going to be helpful for you, you can copy it down. You can write it down. For this moment that we're in together, I would like us to actually do this meditation together now. And for that purpose, I invite you to just sit in a comfortable position, not stiff, relaxed, and Just listen as I read the meditation, and as you hear it being read, allow yourself to settle into what I'm bringing to you at this moment. Watch. Watch what happens. Watch what happens with what arises in your mind and what comes out of your mouth. Watch your moods and emotions and bodily processes. Watch what happens with your activities and the activities of others, even a gesture, a word, a glance. Watch what is happening in the world. In nature, watch everything. In the course of the day, watch the light. In your sleep, watch the dream. Just watch. So let's take a few minutes to just watch, innerly and outerly. Now ask yourself, what have I observed? And now ask yourself, what sees this? Now take up a new contemplation for a moment. Now consider the concept of permanence and your experience of it, its meanings and manifestations in your actual lived experience. Permanence. What does permanence mean? How do you experience permanence? What does it look like? What does it feel like? What do you like about permanence? What do you dislike about permanence? Now let this contemplation open out a bit into contemplating presence. Presence and permanence. Are they the same or different? How? What is presence for you right here, right now? And what sees this? And now just for a little while, let these three dance together in your mind. Impermanence, permanence, and presence. Just let them dance in your mind freely, lightly. Return to this contemplation again and again, mind relaxed, friendly, and receptive. And from time to time, what sees this? Now, a few words on interdependence. When epidemia started to arise and became evident in our experience, globally. A very dear friend of mine who's a scientist, biologist, said, expressed the aspiration that somehow this might bring us together in these separative times that we've been living in, where we've been so fraught with division and the suffering of division and everything that entails for individuals and groups and nations and the planet. And he articulated that aspiration. I had been observing in the news separative kind of tendencies. People were reacting with judgment and criticism and so on to other nations and groups and how they were handling the epidemic in its early stages. And so it was very helpful to hear him articulate that aspiration, that this would be something unifying for us, bringing us really into a full awareness of our interconnections. And then he also said that he was struck by the thought that while humans have this very ingrained and obdurate tendency to build walls, those things that divide, and ideas of separation, Mother Earth appears to have responded in this moment by giving us a virus, an object that we can all share. I'm still enjoying the taste of that ironic wisdom. We never know where the opportunity is going to come from for us to have a shift in view that allows us to see what the moment offers, not just what it might take. And that was a moment for him, and I'm really happy that he shared it with me, because it was a moment for me also. It makes me laugh still to hear that thought in my mind echoing. So I want to speak a little bit about interdependence. Its beauty, its great beauty, sometimes tender, sometimes shocking, sometimes we don't want it, sometimes we want it. So again, I'll just read a little section that I think is very related to this moment, to epidemia. Thich Nhat Hanh, this marvelous, great Bodhisattva being, the Vietnamese monk whom you know, Thich Nhat Hanh, has used a word interbeing that has, for some of us, come into the vocabulary in a very meaningful way. Interbeing, or entre-être, that we are. It's not as if we're cooperating, it's that we inter-are. We are not separate in any way. So that concept, I think, is really a profound opportunity for us to understand interbeing, interdependence, interbeing, our interconnections, deeply in terms of the actual makeup of physical reality, in terms of our emotional lives, in terms of our mental lives, and certainly in terms of our spiritual lives. So here's the little piece that I wanted to share with you. Beings are relying on us, in fact, all the time, because we are completely interdependent. We inter-are. There is nothing on this planet or in our universe that is not affected by every other element or event, not the blink of an eye that doesn't register a pulse somewhere in vast space. If you recognize that your happiness depends on others, then you can be certain that others' happiness depends on you. We are sure seeing that now. The teaching of the self-quarantine, the teaching of social distancing, the teaching of staying home as much as possible, not going out and mingling, not generating circumstances that are group circumstances in which viral contagion can occur. These are teachings quite difficult for social beings like humans to understand, and the explanation has become simpler and simpler as the days go by from those scientists who are speaking to us, to say so clearly, and doctors also among them speaking to us, saying so clearly, if you will not do what you normally do, it will save the life of somebody whom you may or may not know, but it will save someone's life. For you to stay home instead of going out to play, for you to not interact in groups, even though you would like to go on spring break, on the Florida beaches. This might save your grandmother's life. This is a way that's very different from the way we normally think as social beings. It's also very different from the way many, many beings normally think as beings who are caught up in I, me, mine, and what I want to do takes precedence and is more valuable than what somebody else wants me to do. So this is an opportunity and a test for us to see, how are we going to understand interdependence? Are we going to understand our interrelationship as mingling physically, the way we take it to mean it? Or are we going to understand it as taking the choice that actually allows our activity or our not doing something to be of benefit to another? In other words, thinking of others first. Thinking of others first. The Bodhisattva way. Thinking of others first. Another level of meaning of interdependence. Sentient beings, all sentient beings, are highly sensitive and tender, and we are utterly interdependent. Nous entre sommes, we inter are. As we all have Buddha nature, spiritually, we are indissolubly one at the root, while even in the most material sense, we are completely interdependent, mutually affecting and affected. We are interchanging our molecules all the time, breathing in and out together, co-resonant. Anything that one thinks or says or does affects all. So, we're all potentially contagious. Yes? And we're all potentially subject to the contagion that others might carry. Well, you can think of this as epidemia in terms of something dangerous. Or you can think of it as a positive in some way, which is a little counterintuitive, but as practitioners, as people in the world who are subject to the conditions of the world and the circumstances, but who also have an understanding and aspirations that are not limited to the material realities that we're living. I would remind us that the ultimate aspiration of the Bodhisattva, the one who's dedicated to the liberation of suffering, from suffering of all beings, and lives that lifetime to lifetime to lifetime, that the highest aspiration is that all beings attain what we speak of as enlightenment, but we could also speak of it, attain the highest, the absolute realization of love. I call it the great love. Love beyond limits, love beyond persons, things, or circumstances. Love without condition, love without even point of reference. Love that is the natural radiance of the absolute, not an emotion, but the effulgence of the absolute, therefore inseparable from what we call ultimate wisdom. So in this circumstance, epidemia, I would invite everyone on the planet, and specifically those who are sitting here, and specifically those who are connected with us by the live stream, make a very explicit invitation to us all, myself included, that we become a virus, that we propagate a contagion, that we propagate the contagion of love, that we actually be a contagion of love, a great force, a great contagion overtaking the planet. Let's turn the circumstance to the ultimate potential that it offers us. Let's go viral as bodhisattvas. So I'm going to take a little break. So can we go off sound and camera? Jan? Thank you. Be back in a minute. I would like in this moment to be a deity with 1,000 arms and 1,000 hands and 1,000 eyes. There's the absolute, which is stillness, and then there's the relative, which is appearance. These are the two truths, sometimes referred to as a doctrine in the Buddha Dharma, but I think of it more as just facts. Sometimes we hear in teachings in many traditions, not just the Buddha Dharma, we hear the guidance to see material reality as illusory. See it as an illusion. And at the point of realization of the actual nature of reality, it is very easy to see it that way because that's the way it is. But it's not an illusion in our experience. Material reality is not illusory in our experience of it. We experience it through our senses. And as long as we're in a body, as long as we have a physical body, we have a point of reference that the mind keeps returning to, and that understanding keeps seeking understanding from. And the experiences of the senses are very compelling, and they lead us not just to have the reactions of attraction and repulsion or grasping and aversion, but the experiences of the senses are, let me say, inter-are with the confusion of the primary ignorance, which is that we don't see reality's nature directly. So the human experience of confusion, of ignorance, leads us to make up stories about what reality is. Those stories are our life scripts, our narratives of what we are, who we are, what the world is, and how to be in it, how we need to be in it. So the truth of the absolute we are living in all the time. There is no separation from what is true, otherwise we certainly wouldn't be calling it truth. It's not possible for us to be separated from the true nature of our true nature and the true nature of all reality. We are of that. We are that. Our experience, however, in part related to our sensory apparatus and the way we interact with the world, our experience arises conditioned by the utterly innocent misperception and misapprehension of there being something that we refer to as a self, that there is an I. And this experience and misapperception occurs over and over and over again, not just at a certain point in the arising of consciousness, but over and over and over again. It's this that we return to, not so much what touch feels like, or sight feels like, or hearing is like. it's this reference point of the notion of there being an actual selfness to this being that I am, that you are, and to every other material or mental or emotional, physical experience or appearance. That it is in some way fixed, stable, if not permanent, at least in its momentary appearance in our experiential continuum, if not permanent, at least having an intrinsic existence of some sort while we are able to interact with it or perceive it. This gives rise to what we call self-grasping, which is not just selfishness or self-concern, although it has that expression. It is actually the grasping to the notion of an inherent existence or selfness in everything, While in truth, there is no such thing in anything. That's what we mean when we say that existence is illusory. It's not that we don't exist, it's not that this table doesn't exist, it's that it doesn't exist in the way we think it does. That's really an important point. It's one that I encountered over and over again while I was working on this book. Various commentaries spoke in that way, most particularly one by Gyalse Tokme Zangpo, who named it in that way so precisely and so simply and as if it were so obvious that I sort of got it, actually. I sort of got it. And I find it very helpful. Yes, here we are. We don't have to see you as an illusion. But it would be an illusion to think that there's something truly existent in you. So the distinction made was, this is what I would like to share with you, we are real in this way, in this form. We're real. Here we are. Our senses are very clear on the fact that we're here. We're real, but not true. I give that to you this morning as a gift, my friends. Such a relief. In moments of dire, straits and suffering, what a relief. It's real, but it's not true. Now, it's a bit more of a stretch for us as human beings to think the same way when we're tasting something of experience that is delicious or just so pleasing and so fulfilling that we just are so almost dissolved in bliss because of it. Or dissolved momentarily in bliss because of it. And then to think, well, it's real, but it's not true, might set up a little counter current in the mind. But actually, that also is great relief, because the clinging then is also real in the moment, but not true. Your ignorance is real in the moment, but not true. And our suffering is real in the moment, but not true. So this opens a very spacious place in the mind. Yes? And in that relationship of real and not true, or reality and truth, reality, the present reality, and then the truth of its actual nature, that's where the Bodhisattva plays. That's where the Bodhisattva lives and works and walks in the world, whatever world it may be in a given moment. And as aspiring bodhisattvas, we're not quite masters of that dance. But every time we do that little two-step, we get a little rhythm going about how we're going to relate to material reality and how we're going to relate to our aspiration as bodhisattvas. It's a little point counterpoint in the mind, perhaps. Real, not true, and see what kind of a ping that makes in your awareness. Real, not true. And if I may use this term, I don't know that it really applies, but in the space between those two arises the love of the Bodhisattva, the great love that would have us all awaken to that understanding and perhaps delight in it moment to moment. Perhaps see it as a ground of play where we're released from clinging and reaction moment to moment to moment, because that's the way it works. I mean, who gives up attachment as a mind tendency for good all at once? It's more like taking off a Band-Aid. It would be great if you could take it off at once, but mostly we just gotta go, Ugh. I find this this makes me so happy to speak of these things that I just want to burst out laughing, but I have two people in front of me who are not laughing. So I don't know about the rest of you out there, if anybody's laughing here with, oh God, somebody's laughing, that's good. It makes me laugh because it releases me from my conventional mind for a moment. All it takes is a moment, and there you are, just in one moment of glancing within at that reality, you can wake up to see it as it is. That's all we have, one moment, and then another moment. There isn't anything connecting them. I know this sounds so silly, but this makes me it makes me very happy. It also makes me extremely happy to sit in a space with a couple of physical bodies in front of me, but knowing that there are other beings out there who are participating with us in this moment, and that we're connected inseparably. The people who are here in their physical bodies, the physical bodies will disappear at some point. They'll go, but the connection that is occurring with the people who are here not in the physical body, that is a form of presence and communion that never disappears. So when we think about that as the reality that we're living moment to moment, all you have to do is remember what it's like to talk with somebody on the phone. You're conjuring up in your mind that physical person, but that's not what's happening here. The voice is carrying thoughts and feelings and information, but there's no body. There's a vibration being exchanged between the two. Anyway, I shouldn't go too far afield. I want to talk about love, but this is actually related to love. So, in this dual reality of relative and absolute, the two truths, this is the cusp on which the Bodhisattva dance and work and enterprise unfolds. And It starts with suffering. The whole beauteous path begins with suffering on the material plane, in the conventional, in the relative reality, the perception of suffering or the experience of suffering, one's own or that of others, always available. There's always plenty of it to see and experience if you're alive and in a physical body. The perception or the experience of suffering. Some people, I've heard people say, "Oh, the path of Buddhism is so negative; it focuses on suffering." Well, my response to that this morning, because I seem to be in this funny kind of mood of finding things entertaining, my response would be, yes, it's a trampoline. We focus on suffering as a trampoline. Those words have never come out of my mouth before, but we don't focus on it as a pit that we fall into. We focus on it as the means by which we exit the pit of confusion and ignorance, which gives rise to suffering. The base of all of which is self-grasping, is that grasping to the notion of there being an inherent existence in anything. So the Bodhisattva aspiration, sometimes people speak of it in teachings and practice as coming, that compassion, the great love, compassion and love, arise from observing the sufferings of others. I think so. I think it's true that we can develop compassion on that basis. Myself personally, my experience has been that I wasn't really capable of what I would consider authentic, self-renewing, inexhaustible compassion until I saw clearly the nature of my own suffering in mind, body, experience, whatever it may be. That still is the case for me. When I fall into suffering for a moment, there it is in front of me, what the nature of suffering is, how easy it is to fall into it, how hard it is to drag yourself out of it, and how it is real in that moment, but it is also not true. It's of the relative, it's not of the absolute. So contemplating one's own suffering and seeing that, beginning to understanding that through a careful study of karma, which we'll touch on at some point today, probably a lot in the afternoon. Seeing one's own suffering and how it comes and goes is really valuable, very valuable. When I'm in an intense experience of suffering, I think that that's my whole world. I think it's my identity, I think it's my fate, I think all kinds of things about it, but and then it passes. Sometimes, easily and quickly, often not so. Often it's very hard, very difficult to get out of, and very difficult to be with, very difficult to be with. It's like holding your hand on a hot stove, sometimes. But where is it now? Your worst suffering, where is it now? Really, take a moment. The worst suffering you've ever experienced, where is it? Can you find it? You can recreate it in your mind, but it wasn't there a second ago. That's it. So it comes and goes, like all phenomena. What sees that? Really, literally, what sees that? What sees that suffering? What sees it coming and going? That which never comes or goes. Garchen Rinpoche has said, what sees confusion is clarity. What sees confusion is clarity. What sees ignorance is wisdom. In that is your freedom immediately and instantly in every moment. When caught momentarily in self-grasping, what sees that? It's not the self. What sees that? In that instant that you pose that question to yourself about your own experience, in that instant, whatever the experience is that you're questioning about, you're not in it. So if you're in a state of suffering and you inquire within what sees that, and rest your mind in what sees that, even just for a split second, in that split second, you're free. That's the recognizing quality of mind, sometimes referred to as the luminosity or the clarity aspect of mind. It's never not. It always is. It's completely reliable, ever present, unwavering, penetrating, precise, and luminous. That's the absolute. Recognizing the relative, while inseparable from it, because relative and absolute are the two truths together, sawa sawa. Always a union. The Bodhisattva is practicing, living, growing, suffering, understanding, forgetting, remembering, on the cusp. On the cusp. And the way of the Bodhisattva, which we talk about, in the 37 practices and in all of our teachings on the Bodhisattva Yana, the Bodhisattva path, the way of the Bodhisattva is the union of the two truths. The union already is a union, and the path of the discovery of the Bodhisattva, or the practice, is bringing into union as a conscious experience. So let me see if I have an excerpt from the book that would be useful at this moment. A bodhisattva is one who makes the highest altruistic commitment to free all beings from ignorance and suffering and into ultimate wisdom. This intention, followed lifetime to lifetime, is bodhicitta, enlightenment mind. We can also describe the bodhisattva very simply as one who has a good heart, and bodhicitta as love and compassion. That any being might generate the bodhisattva intention is so rare and precious, it is often likened to a flash of lightning in the dark of night. Simply to hear of bodhicitta stirs its potential within us. Love, compassion, radiance of our true nature. Nothing can destroy this. Everything else comes and goes, while our true nature is present beyond all coming and going. Hearing this, we might think, but if this is my true nature, why don't I see it? Why do I suffer and cause others to suffer? Why am I craving, angry, sad, selfish? We are the nature of perfection. We are of the nature of perfection. And we create and experience everything that obscures it from our sight. Perfect. This is what gives rise to spiritual longing and seeking, and what brings forth compassion for others, and eventually for all. Bodhicitta, the good heart of the bodhisattva. Absolute and relative both are. We already are what we aspire to become. We are templates of truth to be laid bare by love. The laying bare is the spiritual work, and love, inseparable from truth, is its ground, its path, and its result. To be what we already are, only two things are required of us: to love and to know. To love completely all beings and all existence, and to know directly the true nature of reality. These two are not two. A primordial, indissoluble union, the non-dual two truths, are the way of bodhisattva being. So let me speak for a moment about relative love and compassion. We could think of them as states of mind and heart that are warmth, that are caring, that are kind, that are generous, that are thoughtful of others, that are concerned, that have a fellow feeling, that have concern for others, and that cherish others, that care deeply and protectively and tenderly, sometimes passionately and ardently. But they really did have to do with the relationship of self and other. And we tend to think of relative love and compassion as emotions. You know, the wonderful Valentine heart, you know, and oh, when I saw that person suffering, I could feel compassion arising in my heart. And to think of love and compassion as emotions is to think of them, to think of them as conditional and relative. In other words, I have compassion for the suffering of this being, but for that being, maybe not so much. Yeah? Or I love my darling so much. And then 20 years down the road, you know, maybe 20 minutes down the road, I don't know how your life unfolds, but so conditional and relative to this moment and not to that. Conditional if that person makes me happy or does what I want or whatever, and maybe not so much if not. But nonetheless, in the experience of it, it enlarges us initially. When we fall in love, you know, there's this wonderful tune, which, don't worry, I won't torment you with singing, that says, it's a big, wide, wonderful world you live in when you're in love. And indeed, when the heart opens in that way, when you fall in love, whether it's with a new baby, whether it's your lover, whether it's your mother, you know, when you literally fall into that state that we call love, really it's as if the limits just disappear. The world is very beautiful, very expansive, very spacious, and very alight, and very comfortable to be in. The edges seem to get abraded by love. They seem to soften the edges. That's why I'm calling the epidemic epidemia, because I want to love everything, including what look like harms. So I've named her Epidemia. Please feel free to call her Epidemia too, and develop an intimate relationship of love with her. Nothing has ever been solved by hatred and fear, only by love. So I introduce you to my friend Epidemia. I take it lightly only in the spiritual sense, not in the sense of what it's happening for human beings and with it. In case anybody's thinking, what is that awful woman talking about? So yes, we register love and compassion emotionally, the vibration in the body and in the mind and so on. We register it emotionally. But the relative reality experiences of compassion and love are reflections of the ultimate compassion and love, which is ultimate bodhicitta. So bodhicitta, that ardent, profound intention to liberate from suffering all beings, that epitome of compassion and love, as we're measuring our paces on the path, walking on the path, developing and practicing love and compassion, caring. Sometimes it has to start just with a simple taking notice of that there is another being in the world besides you. We experience them relatively. We don't experience them absolutely quite yet, perhaps, but we can take note. We can take note in our observation and in our direct experience and in our aspiration, and it plays a very significant role for us in our motivation as Bodhisattva practitioners, that these highest of human qualities, love and compassion, are in their true nature absolute, and in their appearance and expression is our experience in relative reality. They are relative love and relative compassion. They would not exist even in that way did they not also have their true nature experience of emptiness, meaning they're not, they have no inherent existence as a solid Valentine heart, but there's an absolute presence, let's say. I'm not going to use the word existence because that applies to relative material reality, but let me use the word presence. Love is presence. Love is presence. And full and complete, unadorned and bare presence is love. So in the recognition for even an instant the recognition that I use the word presence to refer to, or awareness with a capital A, the way we sometimes speak of it in the Buddhist tradition. That quality of recognizing just as it is. In the instant of that direct seeing, absolute love springs forth. Absolute compassion springs forth. With the implacable longing, commitment, aspiration to liberate all beings into that direct seeing of reality, inseparable from the full and irrepressible and indestructible absolute bodhicitta, emptiness and love, non-dual, one. Sometimes when people have direct insight for an instant into the true nature, sometimes there's great weeping that just spontaneously pours out. Sometimes it's great laughter that also just spontaneously erupts, irrepressible. It's the opening. It's the opening. Opening of the mind of limitation and construction and ignorance into the mind, capital M, mind, we could say, without limits. Original mind, unborn mind. That mind is love, emptiness, love. Rumi said, "Out beyond right and wrong, there is a field. I'll meet you there." A teaching that I received from Garchen Rinpoche personally, and that I then have heard him speak of from time to time, also in teachings, has to do with compassion, love, and courage. And I think it's very valuable to speak of that this morning here. he said to me, Barbara, compassion comes from courage. Courage comes from compassion. Courage comes from compassion. And then he said, and great courage comes from love. I've been unpacking that teaching for years. The common element for compassion and love that seems to relate to courage, or to give rise to courage effortlessly, even though there may be effort that one wants to make to bring courage into action, the arising of the courage is, we've heard so many people, haven't we, say, when somebody's called them a hero for this or that, we've heard so often, like, just doing what anybody else would have done. I mean, people who have great courage expressed in actions that are truly heroic and beyond what we could imagine ourselves engaging in. It's not so much modesty that's reacting by saying it's just what anybody else would have done, or I was just doing my job. It's more an acknowledgement that they weren't in that moment thinking, can I or can't I? Should I or shouldn't I? Will I or won't I? They were precipitated. Very often it's a situation where someone is precipitated into an action. It might just be a simple word spoken that is to rescue another, or to turn a situation from danger to safety, whatever the action may be. Or it may be to commit a lifetime to service of those who are being oppressed or tormented in some way. It might be a moment in which that commitment is made internally. But there's not one instance that I've ever read of in somebody's biography of the heroes whose biographies I grew up on, and those that I still cherish and love to read. Not one that thinks, well, should I or shouldn't I, for more than the split second it takes for that question to become irrelevant and the precipitation into action or speech or a right mind to take place. The shift from self-focus to focus on others is what makes that possible. And it's not labored in the moment of necessity. It's not labored, although we labor on the path with it, maybe for decades or lifetimes. But in the moment of heroism or great courage, maybe it's just courage to confront your own death, or your own illness, for example, in this time. The shrinking from experience that comes with self-involvement is in the instant transformed into the expanded mind of thinking only of the other. Fear disappears. Because there's nothing to protect if there's no self. There's no self when you're thinking of the other. It's as if self doesn't exist. Therefore, what is there to fear? And nobody goes through an operation like that in the mind. It's not a mental, figuring things out. Although I suppose it could be. If you were sitting on I'm not even going to think of an example that's too contrived, but when we're focused on the well-being of another, or the danger of another, or the need of another, it's like the mother with the child, or the father with the child. It's not as if there's a choice. It's not as if if the child's in danger, it's not as if there's a choice. And that sublime choicelessness is the moment that gives birth to a bodhisattva over and over and over again. Perhaps in the same life, countless times over and over again, that moment will occur. And then gradually there is a falling away. This is what I've observed a little bit and heard of. There's a falling away of the habituated tendency to the self-focus. It can arise again swiftly. When there's a moment of perceived danger, it's like what you spoke to me about a little while ago, that when there's an unexpected incursion into a protected space and one experiences danger, all sorts of thoughts related to the I, me, mine can arise, like, this is scary, this is frightening, what can I do, that shouldn't have happened, and so on. And yet, that's just also very passing. It's just passing. That also is just a reaction of the moment, and then you remember, oh, there's no reason for fear here. I wonder what that one needs. What does that one, what does the situation need? What does the person need? And then for that moment, you're focused on the other. And the self-reaction vanishes. It's actually very simple. If you're focused on the other, there is no self. If you're loving the other, the self it dissolves in that moment. The attachment to self, and therefore the grasping to self, and therefore the limitations that come with self. It doesn't mean it never comes back. It means that we have a practice. Yes? And practice in its essence is remembering. Remembering what's true even when caught up momentarily in the false, or especially when caught up momentarily in the false. The practice is to remember, to fall back on what we know to be true, which was where I started this morning, speaking about epidemia. Yes? Hello out there, yes? This is our experience. I mean, over and over again we experience this, that we have moments when we're not caught up in self and where the world is luminous. And then we think, oh, I'm stepping on an ant's hill. The red ants are going to climb up my leg. And then there we are again. And then again, we move the foot so we don't get bit by the ants and so we don't crush them. And there's the luminosity again. That's effortless. Some practices that we do to train ourselves not to think so much of the self, not to be so caught, and to really discipline our minds to care about others, like certain chants that we use, and certain visualizations and so on. It takes some effort to direct the mind to the possibility of thinking differently. It doesn't actually take any effort at all to think differently. The effort is to clear the path so that the spontaneous, natural mind of love freely abides and expresses. The clearing the path, that is the path. Once the path is clear, no more path. So it's actually very simple. Not easy necessarily while we're doing the sweeping part. The part where we're sweeping the path, not so easy necessarily. That we have to remember to do. And we have to reaffirm the commitment to doing it. And then we have to do it. So some effort is required there, but mainly the effort that's required is the effort not to do that which we've always done. That's where the effort is. The effort to do nothing for however long it takes, to choose to do that which is in the resonance of love, is in the resonance because that resonance is within us like a bell, like the vibration or the tone of a bell, because it is truth. Love is true at the absolute level. And our experience of love in the relative is its reflection and also its window and its doorway. One of the most profound practices is loving the one in the many and the many in the one. The experiences of attachment love and personal love that we have in our lives as human beings, and you can see this also in the animal world, are experiences of partiality and preference. And also they are points of practice and expansion for us, if we choose. One can inhabit one's relationships of love in the relative with the intention of increasing attachment one to the other. That's extremely common in families and lover relationships, relationships of friends, work relationships, and so on. That in fact the experience of the loving, which may have been very open and expansive to begin with, becomes perhaps degraded or tightened as time goes by, and the practice becomes, the practice of that loving relationship can often then be subverted by the desire for attachment to increase, not decrease. I don't know what the reaction would be if people attending a wedding, if the marriage vows included I vow to love you forever, and especially now in this life, and I vow to decrease my attachment to you moment to moment to moment. Wouldn't that be marvelous? But that's a practice. For practitioners, for bodhisattva, aspiring bodhisattvas, every love relationship we have, which is personal love, our intention should be gradually to erode that personal love aspect and increase our capacity for impersonal love. That doesn't mean non-personal love. It means impersonal. It means love expanding, not attaching. Not to make the world smaller, but to make it larger. Which it is. It's infinite. So, what do you think of that? I want to go to that wedding. I don't want to go to any other wedding. That's the only wedding I want to attend. What?
When you get married.
I'm totally deaf. What'd you say? Okay.
In his wedding.
Oh, are you getting married?
No.
Okay, there's a controversy among the participants at this time. We'll move on. So the one and the many in the one. So in the world, practicing as the aspiring bodhisattvas that we are, and even those who may not have recognized yet that they're aspiring bodhisattvas, I don't think you would be here listening and watching and sitting here if that intention were not in your continuum already. So here we are. This is a convention of bodhisattvas. Some have T-shirts, some sweatshirts that say Bodhisattva you, but or Bodhisattva me. Okay, stop, Barbara. So the practice in our relative reality existence, the practice on the many and the one, is to love the one in the many and the many in the one being capital O1, meaning the all, the absolute, to all beings, that in your beloved, whether it's your child or your parent or your friend or your lover, or your enemy, or your enemy for that matter, in the one we love all. The one before us, the one who's close to us, the one whose hand we hold, the one whose diaper we change, the one whose ideas we celebrate. We love that one in that one's particularity and specificity. This particular person in this particular time, in this particular moment, I love this one. And remembering, and this one is a representative of all beings. Always remember that. And when you think of that phrase that we often use, all sentient beings, it can become an automatic phrase that rolls off the lips, off the tongue, and become increasingly meaningless unless you recognize the meaning of it every time you say that term, all sentient beings. So that's the many, right? So love the one in the many, and the many in the one. So loving the one particular and remembering that that's a representative, it's one of the many, then the other frame is loving the many in the one, the one in the many. I got confused. Not an unusual event. The discipline of mind is to remember that the one is the representative of the many, and to love the one that way decreases that clinging, grasping attachment. And then if we look, for example, now at the globe and the tremendous wave of suffering that epidemia is bringing, a lot of fear, a lot of greed, grasping, anxiety, great pain in the actual illness, and great suffering and sorrow with the deaths. That's the experience of the many. But each one is experiencing in their own way that ocean or that great river of suffering that's running across the planet. So when we look at the experience of the many, let's bring it down to loving and caring about each specific one. Even though we may not know anybody that's having the great suffering of the coronavirus, we know somebody who's afraid of it, or somebody who knows somebody who's suffering it, or somebody who knows someone who's died of it, or who's dying of it now as we speak. And this interplay of the one and the many, and the many and the one, it is so expanding to our mind and so grounding to our love. So that the awareness expands and the love is grounded in the moment, in the particular, but without increasing attachment. I recommend this practice so highly. Even if you get confused, like me, about which part of it am I practicing right now? The one and the many, or the many and the one? Sawa, same. Good? Good. It's really helpful right now. Right, very helpful. Let's just sit for a minute, shall we? Everybody out there, should we just sit for a little bit? I want to come back for a moment to epidemia and karma. I'm sure that many of you have heard the expression, the changing times. It's a phrase that comes from the way that some indigenous of this continent and actually this hemisphere and this continent, North and South America, and maybe other indigenous cultures as well, have spoken of the time of purification of the planetary consciousness. This is not a teaching that comes, at least as I have not experienced or received this teaching from the Buddha Dharma, but I'm bringing it in today because I think it's highly relevant and it's not in any way other than what we receive in the Buddha Dharma. And from the teacher whom I studied with for many years, of one of the indigenous nations of this continent, I received a teaching, this was a long time ago, that she had received from her elders, from her old people, which was that in the changing times, the time of purification for the planetary mind, remember I spoke earlier of collective karma and individual karma, so planetary mind would be collective karma. It might also be the mind of this particular sentient being that we call Earth, which in many cultures is understood to be a sentient being, the mother. That there would come a time when the minds of human beings would need to change. The mind, the consciousness, the common consciousness, and the consciousnesses of individual human beings would need to change, need to transform. And if that would happen soon enough and fast enough, quickly enough, the transformations needed for the planetary well-being and continuation of good life for beings of the planet would be able to go through the necessary transformations relatively easily. But if the human mind, the minds of human beings did not change quickly enough, the elements would make the changes for us. And that would be much more difficult, and it would mean many beings leaving the planet, and so on. I've never forgotten that teaching, and it used to surprise me very much when people would say, well, when the changing times come. I think it's been quite evident for quite a while that the changing times are well upon us, and that the mind of human beings, certainly there are changes, very profound changes, in which the oneness of humanity, the oneness of all of life, not just humanity, and the non-dual nature of reality are recognized and lived forth in ways that are very profound and transformational for everything. But here we are with epidemia sweeping away, sweeping through and sweeping away. And so I think it's extremely valuable to understand what we mean in the Dharma when we talk about purification. It's not like a greasy cooking pot that you have to scrub and then it'll be clean again. That's not what purification means. Purification means sweeping away what obscures our ability to see reality as it is. The primordial purity revealed, always having been present and ready to be seen, because what is, and it can be immediately perceived, but we have that which obscures the vision. So purification is, in that sense, used in the Buddha Dharma. And in some healing traditions, the word purification is sometimes used to mean a process by which the body, the physical body of a being, extrudes the poisons or the toxins in the system. All of these meanings, are not opposed to each other. It can all be happening in the same frame with different explanatory systems or paradigms being brought to bear to understand. So I think we could look at them all as being quite applicable to our understanding in the moment. And the purification of negative karma is its appearance in experience or in the realms of manifestation. The results of negative karma, their very appearance, their very arising in our experience, is the manifestation of their purification. This is such a difficult thing for Westerners, at least in my experience, to really grok that the suffering is the vehicle of its own purification. The suffering is the purification of its cause. Yes? But the suffering is the purification of its cause. And this afternoon we're going to go into detail about some of the dynamics of that and how to work with it, because it is the most workable. It's the most workable phenomenon that we will ever encounter, but it certainly bears talking about in these kinds of situations where we can really focus on not the experience, but the dynamics that are involved and how to work with them creatively and transformationally. So that's what the afternoon will be. I'm so grateful that we're here together, all of us, in bodies and in minds. My disembodied friends, I'm looking at you through the camera. I know you're sitting in your bodies, but for me, it's just your beautiful minds that I'm interacting with this morning. Your great hearts, your great love that brings us all together. And I'm very glad to have two friends as anchors here. In front, right in front. It's good. I was wondering, how am I, who's so interactive, going to possibly be able to get to do this with nobody in the room? Besides my cameraman, who's, I believe, having beautiful meditation the whole time. Or, don't know. I can't see his face because it's behind the tripod. So I want to thank you very much for being here. Will you come this afternoon too, or will I have to persuade you? Okay, this is your duties for this afternoon? Yeah, okay, good. This is your work assignment for the afternoon. Show up so Barbara can have someone to talk to in the room that anchors us with everybody. So this is a perfect example of the two in the many and the many in the two. Yes? Because I have no idea who's watching and who's with us in the live stream, but don't you love the phrase, the live stream? So we'll find out. I'll find out who some of them are, and maybe we'll have some questions to bring in, and it's good. It's good. So we'll talk more about karma and purification and transformation. The Bodhisattva is mastering the methods, first of all the intention, and then the methods of using suffering as the fuel of of the suffering for its transformation. So it's an extremely, extremely intimate relationship with karma. And intimacy is what we talk about when we talk about relationships with what we love. So this afternoon, I want to share with you my joy in discovering how to love our karma. How to love our karma. And it's why the name epidemia can come from me with, clearly you experience the energy of love when I say the word epidemia. It's just a very loving sense. So the intimacy of our relationship with karma, I want to talk with you about that this afternoon. And we'll talk about the dynamics of how we work with karma as well. Okay? So if I come back in this afternoon having forgotten what I want to talk about this afternoon, I very much appreciate you writing down what I just said and reminding me. Maybe I'll take a moment to write it. I'll take a moment to write it down. So we're not even going to say the dedication of merit because we are uninterrupted between now and the end of the session in the afternoon. So we don't have to. We're still in the generating of merit, not the dedicating of it. You can dedicate it every minute if you want. That's good too. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay. Okay. Thank you, everybody.